Welcome everyone back to another video presentation. Tom here. These are a portion of the Vermillion Cliffs as they follow the course of US Highway 89 east of Kanab in southern Utah. As a member of the Plein Air Painters of Utah, I'm getting this painting ready for a future exhibit. We've been working on US Highway 89 drawings and paintings along that stretch there as a group because it goes through such an important part of Utah. Right down through the center, it follows basically what we call the spine of Utah. You're seeing some drawing work here that I'm doing. I'm just basically reemphasizing what I've already done. In a second here, I will walk you through some of the analyzation things I was doing in order to be able to get the proportions correct for the beginning of the process of making this painting. So here we have the photograph alongside the drawing on the sheet of watercolor paper that I have done. Now, as you can see, the ratio is not the same. The photograph is longer widthwise than the painting will be, and that's okay. I've been able to make the translation pretty well. So I want to walk you through some of the ways in which I visually analyzed my subject in order to figure out what lies where. Actually, in the photograph as well as in the drawing, point B or point 2 are the key points I wanted to find within the scene. And so vertically, I compared it with the rest of the image. So I compared B to A. What was that distance there, which is the top edge of the scene? Well, it's equal to where I have point C, and it's equal to where I have point D. Well, I tried to make corresponding coordinate points within the picture plane as I was drawing it in order to accomplish the same thing. So that's one way that I analyzed it. And then horizontally, I had that tree to place correctly where I wanted it to be. Well, how does that compare with the far left edge? How does that compare with the random point I find it at in the middle of the road as compared with the far right side, which happens to coincide with the far edge of the borrow pit? Well, those are the kinds of relationships, proportional relationships that I could make judgments on and be able to execute this drawing in a more correct manner. And I just laid them out as little tick marks as I tried to figure things out and then drew in what I felt was correct. The angles, capturing of angles, we have here the major angles of the road. Those angles are what helps give this space a sense of depth. It's what helps us to feel like we're going back into that depth of space. So it was important to capture in the drawing as well. Now, because I have the frame of reference of the edge of the picture plane, I could see where that line would intersect the edge of the picture plane from the photograph and compare it with where I would have that intersect in the drawing itself. And that helped me with getting proportions correct as well and capturing angles. There were some major angles within the landscape itself that I sought to try and establish where they lied correctly in the depth of space. And that's what these lines are seeking to indicate. And then also, I had just general overall shapes to compare, and this is just a couple. This is positive and negative space relationship comparisons using my own visual judgment to see what shape looks like what and how to get that looking correct. Now, you can see here in the drawing that I'm not going to include a couple of trees on the far left edge of the scene. I did not put them there because I don't want them to detract or distract from the scene going down this road. So that's a design decision that I was making. And there's more to talk about with regard to this as I get into the painting aspect of this process. But I hope that explanation helps. And so I'm beginning with wetting down, especially the upper portion of this scene, because I want to paint in the sky wet into wet. I want to create a smooth transition between the sky and where the mountains of the Vermillion Cliffs begin. And so that's what you'll be seeing in this process here. This blue that I use, it has a bit of opaque white in it, but I paint it very thin and wash-like. I just love the way it kind of gives me a ready-made blue for my sky. And then I am painting an angle there, and you'll see that happen a little more concretely here in a second, as I pick up a little bit of yellow ochre and put it in that spot on that angle. I'm creating an angle that counters the angle of the road. So this is a design decision that you're watching take place here. The reason why I'm using yellow ochre as opposed to yellow is because of the interaction that occurs between the blue and the yellow ochre. It goes gray as opposed to turning green. And I want to be careful of greening the sky in ways that I don't want to. Also remember that as I'm painting wet into wet, that the colors will spread and that they will dissipate some, and what may feel a little too strong or a little too dark will mellow as it dries, and you can see that that is what has happened there. So now it's fully dry, and again I want to have a wet area to let the color of those background cliffs and mountains bleed into. So I'm wetting the paper again, and then I'm going to paint into that with that initial kind of a lavender color that I'm laying in there in those distant cliffs. Now what I'm painting first is the sunlit side of these cliffs. Later on you'll see me paint the shadowed side of these cliffs, and I'm keeping them as just simple two colors, not trying to get too much detail or even contrast in the back there. I want it to feel like it really sits in the distance. That's important. So now I am laying in the darker blues, and again this is still the light side of the cliffs that are in the kind of the middle distant ground there, as I'm painting them in with that blue. As I'm moving along with the brush, I'm trying to paint quickly enough not to allow the paint to dry too much, so that I get an unwanted edge there in that passage of color that I'm laying in. Also, as you can see, I've turned it upside down in order to kind of work it to my advantage. It was better for me to paint up against that bottom edge there with it upside down than with the right side up. So, whatever works for you, right? And yes, I'm having to carefully paint around that tree, that middle ground juniper that's standing there. Now coming in with more of the darker shadowed portions of it all. This brush that I'm using, I've talked about it before. It's a low Cornell ultra round brush. They actually don't make them anymore. Low Cornell does not, but I understand King Art is a company that sort of has a similar type of brush. But this low Cornell, I really like how it has the ability to give me a very fine point, and yet when I press down with the brush I can really lay in a full belly of paint, and it really spreads it out nicely. So I really like a brush that has versatility to it, like this Low Cornell does. And so my Low Cornells are old, but I keep using them to the bitter end, but they're really good brushes. Now, some of the incidental textures that you see in the painting of that passage of the scene, some of those incidental textures are okay because they do kind of suggest elements of those distant cliffs, mountains, ridges, and again, it's not precisely like what is there in the photo, but it certainly communicates the spirit of the place, and that's important to me. And so here we have the shadowed portions of the distant ridgeline going in. So I'm carefully working that along its bottom edge so it does not create an unwanted edge there against those hills that are sitting in the foreground. So again, with my kind of tradition there, light to dark, top to bottom, back to front, general to specific, working from top to bottom, starting with the sky. It also happens to be the most distant element in my landscape, and so it went in first, and then just layering forward with things overlapping each other, it helps to allude to the sense of distance and things feeling like there's deep space. And that's why I paint in this manner the way that I do. Well, welcome back, everyone. Tom here after the music video. Hope you enjoyed the music. Anyway, just a way to help pass the time in a comfortable way for you as you watch the video. This is the portion of the painting that can seem a little tedious, but it's necessary. It's all a part of the process, and if you're going to be a visual artist, there's aspects of the images that you choose to paint that are sometimes going to be the tedious part for you, and you just have to learn how to work through them. Me, I listen to a lot of music when I get to this point, and it helps me through. The marks, as you're watching me lay them down, are done in a manner that I call a hop, skip, and a jump. Kind of a staccato pattern, if you will, for laying down the paint in a manner that helps to allude to the texture of the place that I'm trying to describe there, whether it be texture of grasses or the texture of that road, whatever it may be. And I've just kind of developed that kind of handwriting with my brush, and I hope that makes sense. So I'm sharing that with you. So yeah, as far as the tedium of it is concerned, well, that's the way it is. You got to take the good with the bad. And so we're slogging on through to the end, and we're doing okay. And now it's time to work in the opaque passages of this watercolor painting. Because of the nature of putting in all that texture of the road, the asphalt road, I decided I could not easily protect the white of the paper as I needed to draw in that stripe. I don't like to do that with any kind of masking agent because it just kind of doesn't look right to me. I kind of don't like it, so I prefer to paint it in with opaque white, and that's what I'm doing here. Just carefully working in that pattern and making sure that I keep my oils, my body oils from my hand off the paper. I want to protect that paper as much as I can. It took a couple of passages with this brush to really help the paint to sit and look good on that surface and help it to look bright enough in that morning sun. There's also a little bit of wobble, or I don't know if wobble is the right word, variation in the road's surface as it was following the lay of the land. And so as my line isn't perfect, I'm accepting that. I'm okay with that because of that feature of the landscape as I was studying the photo. So that's just a little, I believe it's just a 1/2 inch wide brush that I was laying that, no, 1/4 inch wide brush that I was laying that in with. So now opaque white mixed with transparent yellow to make a gouache yellow, and that's what I'm now laying in there for the stripes of the road. It is important to remember at this point that even though things look a little wacky in terms of proportions, it just feels like that side of the road is way too wide. I'm trusting what I'm seeing in my photo source, and I'm drawing that as opposed to what I think might be the case. And that's important to do. Trust what you see in this situation, and the proportions will feel more correct in the end when you finish the piece. I showed some graphic yellow lines there just to try and briefly indicate the angles that I was trying to establish in my drawing with the brush, as I was establishing the lay of the land there. I drew that line of that telephone pole with the aid of a ruler. My brush wasn't against it, but my finger was as I dragged my finger along. So now you're going to see a different way of doing it. I'm going to move from the shoulder and not move my fingers or my wrist. Just pull straight down. It's a little bit of an acquired skill, but it can be done. So there's a couple of examples of how you can do that. Now also, as I'm drawing in these poles, I'm actually drawing them in taller than they really were, but I think they serve the situation well. And then as I lay in subsequent poles, they're becoming smaller and they're becoming closer together. Transfer of scale and diminution of size is what's going on there, as I'm trying to indicate with the pink lines. Well, we're really coming down to it. There are a couple more things I'll do off camera, but really the last thing there is to do is put a signature on it. And then we'll be done. I hope you've enjoyed the process of watching this piece come together. Thank you for coming along for the ride.